So let's start off by renaming our first sheet to January. And then at the top, let's start with our income category. I'm going to put our categories in column A and our income and expenses in column B. If we just shrink column A, our format will look like everything in column B is just indented from column A. So let's say we have two different sources of income, wages and art sales. Let's put in the values for each of those. So let's say we make 2,000 from wages and maybe 300 from art sales. Before we sum it up, I'm going to add a top border to our total line. And then we can either type in our equation, or we could use the auto sum button from the home tab or from the formulas tab. Everything in column C is going to be monetary values. So I'm going to change the format from general to accounting. So the accounting format shows 2 decimal places and adds commas in the thousands and millions and so on. And I'm bolding the title of each category. So let's make our first expense category rent and utilities. And then put in every expense under that category. And put values in for each one. And then sum it up. Our other expense categories are going to be entertainment, essentials, and miscellaneous. Now that we have all our totals, let's go through and give each of them a name. So we could just click on any cell. We could click here and type in a name. But since we need to have multiple sheets that will all include the same names, let's add our names under the Formulas tab and go to Name Manager. Let's start with a new one. Name that Income. Change the scope to this tab or this sheet. Click on Refers to, and then on the cell that we want to be named, click OK. Do the same thing again. We're going to shorten some of these names. We'll call this one Rent Util. And now anywhere in this sheet, we can include those names in any formula. So just as an example, if I go equals income, this cell refers to this cell. And to demonstrate why we wanted to use the scope of just the sheet, let me just name this cell test. And if we go into a new sheet, I could go equals test. We get that number. But now if we go to equal income, it doesn't know what it's talking about because that income is only valid on the sheet that it was named. So now on this sheet, let's make our totals. I'm going to add a double border above the totals. So under our totals, we're going to have two things, income and expenses. So for income, it's just going to be equal to income. And for expenses, it's going to be equal to rent and going to be equal to the sum of rent, utilities, entertainment, the essentials, and MISC. Oops. And then from that, we want to know how much we have left over after all of our expenses. So it's going to be equal to our total income minus our total expenses. Now what happens if we need to add or remove an expense? Let's say from entertainment we need to get rid of the movies. You can click on that, right click on the row and delete the whole row. Or maybe we need to add prescriptions to our essentials, right click on the total line and insert a row. And put whatever value it is you need to spend on that. If there's only two in any category, if we insert a line, it doesn't automatically update the value, but if we click on that cell, it gives us a little warning thing. If we hover over it, it says the formula in this cell refers to a range that has additional numbers adjacent to it. Click on it and go update to include cells. Now let's add a pie chart to show what fraction of our total expenses each expense category consumes. So file, insert a pie chart, and then right click on the pie chart and go select data. Under legend entries or series, click add. Name it expense categories. Click on the series values. Click the up arrow, delete the equals 1. Hold down Control and click on all the values of our expense categories. To give them meaningful names, click Edit under the category names. Do the same thing, hold Control, and click each category name. And we probably don't need a title on our chart, so just get rid of the chart title. Let's also get rid of the legend. Let's add data labels to it. That gives us the values of each. But we can also add our names to each of those. Let's just change the color of this one to white so it's easier to see. Oh, but only select one. Let's change those ones back to black. Where did it go? And we can fiddle with the size of this one so that entertainment fits on one line. miscellaneous. Now that we're done with January, we can copy it to our other months. You may or may not want to blank values when you copy them to new sheets. In our case, I'm not going to. So to make a copy, right-click on the January tab, go Move or Copy, create a copy, and move it to the end. Because they're exactly the same, we can hold Shift and click a second sheet, and then right-click and Move or Copy, move to end again, create a copy. When I made some of our names, I neglected to set them to, I neglected to set the scope to the sheet. So if we go under Name Manager again, we notice we have a bunch that are Scope of Workbook, and they all should be for whichever sheet they're associated with. So all the ones with workbook tags should be associated with the 1st January. Those are all correct, and since I haven't changed the January sheet, I'm just going to delete the January sheet. Rename the copied one, which has the correct scope in the names. Just check it quickly. We can delete all these workbook scoped ones. And then go back to copying. So right-click, Move or Copy, put it at the end, and create a copy. Once we have more than one, we can hold Control and click on the ones that we want to copy. Right-click, Move or Copy, create a copy. Forgot to move it to the end, not a big deal. Then we can select all 4. And if we copy 4 more, then we'll have 12. Now I'm going to go through and rename each to a month. And then you can go through and modify the values for each month. Now let's add a sheet for our yearly report. Oops. The first thing we want to do is to bring all of our total values into this one sheet. So we'll have a column for each month and a row for each category. So I've made this column for our categories, but I'm going to make this column and add our cell names that we used. And then across the top, let's name our months. we just start with January. Excel is smart enough to, if you click and drag the bottom corner, right corner, Excel will recognize that you want each month. So for this, we could go equals, go to the sheet that we want to get from, click on the cell, go enter, and that would give us that. But that would be super time consuming. We can use a formula called indirect to get our information from the month name and then the category name. To use indirect to get this cell, we would use the string January exclamation mark income So if we put January income in this cell here, we went indirect and gave it that, then we would get that value. But we can also arrive at January exclamation income by going equals concat the cell containing January, a string with just an exclamation mark, and the cell containing income. And then again, we could use indirect and feed that in. Or we can put everything in one step by going indirect. The reference is concat the cell exclamation and the other cell and tell it yes to automatically complete it. Okay, so let's cut that cell and drop it in there. And since all our months are in row 1, the cell that represents the month, I'm going to put a $sign in front of the 1. And because the categories are all in column B, I'm going to put a $sign before the B. And that way when we drag these all along, and then down, find all those values. I think for this one I must have spelled rent util wrong. So let's go back to any one of these here and see what we named this. Oh, okay, I forgot the T in rent util. And there we go. I've went back now and made changes in each month, so they're all a little different values now. So now let's add some totals. So I'm going to add a total for each category. And I've turned off automatic update of formulas because I've got some random functions on some of the other pages to make the differences. So if you've done anything that you don't want to keep updating all the time, you can turn off automatic under calculate options. And then when you want to calculate, come back and click calculate sheet. For most applications, you'll want to leave it on and allow it to complete on its own. Let's add a row for how much we're going to put into savings each month. It's just the difference from our income and our expenses. So we could either do that by referencing the totals from our other pages, or just reference the columns here. So we're going to subtract the sum of our expense categories. You might also want to add a row for how much we've saved so far this year. So for the first month, it'll just be equal to January. Every other month after that will be the prior month plus this month. It's up to you whether you want to change all the formatting to accounting or just leave them as numbers, because you know everything is in dollars. There's plenty of different charts we can use to display information from this sheet. Maybe a line graph that shows how our income and our expenses changed from month to month. We could just select this whole range, but remember we hit a column in here that contains the names of cells from our other sheets. So to exclude that column, first highlight our A column, hold Control, and highlight the rest of them. Now go under the Insert and pick a line chart. Now we can see how our income changes. We can see a slight trend as our utilities go down some during the winter. If we were to separate out our rent from our utilities, you would see much more of a trend there, because things like our gas and electricity are going to go down during the winter, but our rent is going to remain constant. We can show a pie chart to show what fraction of our yearly expenses each category consumes. To do that is easier than our monthly ones, because now we can just select the categories of expenses and select the categories, hold Control, and then select the numbers that go with them. Then under Insert, go to Pie Chart and enter a pie chart. And format it as you will. Instead of values, maybe let's show just the percentages. And because it puts them all in there, why don't we change the color of our text to white so that it's slightly more readable. Let's go back to our line chart. We might want to rename that monthly income and expenses. We might want to add dollars to the vertical axis. So click on that, and if this isn't already open, double click, go to Axis Options, go down to Number, and under Category we can change that to Currency or Accounting. Let's choose Currency. Notice that it includes cents, which we don't really need for this. So scroll down to where we get to this format code and just delete the decimal and the 2 cents. Click Add, and it gets rid of those and gives us a little more space on our chart.